Okay, we're going to go ahead and start to move forward. We have just 2 more sessions for the end of the day. I will be spending the next 30 minutes or so talking about communications, and then we will have time for an activity after that. The activity, the elevator pitch activity, is really one that you definitely can spend a lot of time practicing and perfecting with your peer members, and really sort of taking time to determine exactly how it is that you want to introduce yourself during the year. So definitely feel free to spend a little bit more time on that. If some of you want to return back to some activities from earlier today that maybe you didn't get to, whether or not it was the budgeting activity or the circle of need or the project management activity, you should have a little bit of extra time at the end of the day to do that. And then same situation, we'll end the day today with, just like yesterday, with AmeriCorps CivicSpark Q&A. I will remain on the line if any questions do come in, but for those regions who maybe it's going to be an easier conversation just to have them amongst yourselves and you don't need me there, you can end the webinar a little bit earlier, or even end the day a little bit earlier if that's what it comes down to. So diving into communication. We talked about communication in professionalism on Tuesday, but we wanted to go in a little bit more in depth into this topic today, since communication is essential to getting across your message and building relationships. So let's see. Today we will try to get my PowerPoint to start. Okay, so that's a good start. Today we're going to focus on understanding the importance of professional communication and also talk about some of the best practices in communication. And definitely when we're talking about communication here, we're talking about verbal, we're talking about written, we're talking about nonverbal, email, and whatnot. So we'll go through all of that. The ability to communicate information accurately, clearly, and as intended is really a vital life skill and an essential skill that all employers seek, which is why we are coming back to this topic and talking about it again. Communicating effectively is essential to dialogue and to understanding. And we want each of you to be strong communicators, and so I hope that you see that that's going to also help you at better understanding the communication that comes to you throughout the year. And really, it's never too late to work on your communication skills. It's something that we would encourage you to work on throughout this year, but it's something that we also continue to work on. Kip and I are constantly working on it, and I'm sure your regional supervisors will be able to provide some examples as to how it has been important in their life. As I mentioned earlier, all types of communication skills are important to work on, and so we will be thinking about verbal, written, visual, and nonverbal today. And this slide is specifically from Kip, and so this is one of his most important things, most important pieces of advice that he feels he can give to you starting out in this year is really learning to edit. Editing is huge, and it's imperative to take time to edit all types of communication, both written and verbal communication. On Tuesday, we talked a lot about tone and remaining professional in tone, but you should also aim to learn how to communicate in different voices and in different tone. Taking time to learn how to communicate to different people or different organizations is going to be great, because you'll be able to share the same message but in different ways and to different audiences. And that honestly is essential to being heard. It's also essential to building understanding and buy-in for your project. A lot of you will be doing outreach throughout the year, and so learning how to tailor a message to reach different audiences is going to be very key. And one of those pieces is learning to edit your work, being able to look at something you've already written or a pitch that you're going to say, an outreach message that you're going to say, and viewing it in different ways, thinking about how you would say it to different people or thinking about how someone else would say it, and using that to edit your written document or your verbal speech that you're going to give in order to be more effective at reaching more audiences. Let's see. I would say one of the biggest things when it comes to learning to edit is it does take a lot of practice, and it's one of those things where you shouldn't be afraid to ask for help, whether or not that's from your regional supervisor or from someone else. Being able to take time to get that feedback is going to help you to be better at editing and you to be more effective and more efficient when you're first writing different documents. So just a list of best practices. We're going to spend some time now really looking into best practices in all sort of types of communication. These are just some of your general best practices, both for verbal and nonverbal. As I was mentioning just now, considering your audience and tailoring your points to their unique interests. Organizing your thoughts in a way that builds off of each point and works towards a conclusion. So really thinking through what you're saying before you're going to say it, or thinking through what you're writing before you're going to write it. And that also comes into asking the 5 W's, making sure that you're going through all of those pieces as you are putting together your items so that it is said in a way that builds off of each point and works towards a conclusion. Getting specific, getting personal, focusing on leaves behind, not takeaways. And then a few more best practices, and these are really the verbal communication best practices. I mentioned earlier, one of the things that is really key about communication and taking time to understand your own communication is it also helps you to be a better listener. It helps you to be an active listener, and really listening is just as important as talking. If you're going to have the same pitch and not listen to anyone and give that to absolutely everyone, you're going to see everyone's eyes just sort of glaze over. It's not going to be quite as effective as if you listen and respond to what is being said to you. And that also goes to having courage to ask questions, making sure that you are engaging the listener and then responding to them. Making eye contact, enunciation, slow your speech down. That's something both Kit and I have problems with. We are fast talkers and we realize this. Animate your voice, practice in advance when it's important. And then nonverbal communication. And I had mentioned earlier for all the regional supervisors to key up this video. It sounds like a few of the different regions might be having problems accessing it. So we're not going to break right now so that you can watch it, but after the end of this PowerPoint, which shouldn't take that much longer, I'll allow you guys to take time, if you can access it, to watch it on your end and before you launch into the activity. It is just a good example of nonverbal and verbal communication tips, and it gives examples of good tips and the bad examples of doing that. And so you'll be able to really sort of see those types of nonverbal things that you may not notice that you're doing as you're talking to someone. And really, one of the big things I would say about this is be aware of what your body is saying, because you definitely can convey a message without realizing it, and being aware of that will help you to not convey something that you don't want to, or to send mixed messages. Looking at best practices for written communication, I mentioned earlier, learning to write in different voices is really important. Trying to write as someone else or for someone else is also very helpful in getting to that. So taking time to sit down and try to write as your supervisor, for instance, or the project lead, that's going to give you, it's going to make you think about a different way to say the things that you would say, and that will help you understand sort of these writing in different voices. Work on editing, and one of the things I will say about working with editing, it's really essential to put some distance from the text. write down what you need to do, and then walk away and work on something else for a little bit and come back a while later. And that's going to be essential for giving you sort of a new view on things. It'll help you cut out non-essential words. It will help you edit and proofread because it'll be a little bit less familiar to you. And so you'll be able to see some of the errors that you might not have noticed if you had come back to it right away or tried to edit immediately after you wrote something. Give feedback, I mentioned that earlier, and really be aware that it's going to take time to not only to get all of these habits down and to learn to be an effective communicator, but really if you're putting together a very important document, that's probably not something that you can do in one sitting. It takes time to write well. And so being patient with yourself and taking it a little bit easier, you know, maybe writing a little piece of it every day, or writing a section and then coming back the next day and editing that section, then writing the next section, coming back the next day and editing that, and then writing that. Taking it in stages is going to help you stay sane throughout the entire process, but again, it's going to sort of distance you from it. So you'll be able to come towards your final document in a very purposeful way, and hopefully that final document would be better, more effective at actually getting across the message that you want to share. And again, I think this is going to be essential for most of you who are doing any sort of outreach, and that is probably the majority of you listening in right now. Those documents are going to a lot of times have to maybe have some persuasion in them. They're going to have to be very clear. They're going to have to be very good at grabbing attention and being effective in speech. And so don't think that, you know, marketing documents are something that you can write in one sitting and be done with it. Be patient with yourself and understand that it is a process even for someone who has been working on that type of thing for years. So jumping into a little bit of a new topic, and I believe this is really what I'm going to spend the rest of the time talking about, is really communicating with both text and email. And email especially, as this will be one of the main ways that you will be communicating during the year, and it's one of the main ways that communication happens in any office place any longer. You can think about the interview process that you went through with us and how many emails were bouncing back and forth before you actually showed up to training on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday or whenever you got here this week. All of those emails, that's a regular communication trail, and that's something that you're going to have to deal with. So you can definitely see how email is going to be a big part of how you communicate. With texting, really quickly, we'll jump into email, but with texting, just a few things to know, and there are the bullet points that you can read on your own, but a few things I wanted to point out. Watch your tone. We've said this a lot, and by we, I mean me. I've been the one talking about tone so far. Being sure to watch your tone in your text, because it is very easy to miscommunicate over text and to have something come across more abruptly or not in the exact way that you want it to. And I'm sure in all of your personal lives, you can think of a time when you sent a text meaning for it to be sarcastic or meaning for it to be funny, and it came across as something completely different. So again, making sure that you're paying attention to your tone. Watching autocorrect, and this is true when you're emailing from your phone or a tablet as well. Making sure that you're aware of that and you're proofreading and doing that editing. And also making sure that it's okay to text someone. You really wouldn't want to send a text to, let's say, a council member you're working with if you haven't asked that person first if that's an okay way to communicate. Most of us take for granted nowadays that text is a way that you can communicate, and more often than not, it is absolutely fine. But when you're talking or when you're working with maybe someone up a little bit higher in the organization that you're working with, or someone that you're not so closely working with on a day-to-day basis, it's good to just say, is it okay if I shoot you a text if I have a question, rather than assuming that that's okay. So jumping into email, and really, I just mentioned the interview process as an example of just how many emails you get each day, but that was just one conversation really that you were having. And so think about how many emails and how many conversations you're getting throughout the day, and how you may not really understand the message of a lot of those emails, or that they may convey the wrong tone, or they just don't engage you. I can tell you every morning I look at my email and I just automatically delete probably 10 emails without reading them, because I look at them and I say, meh, I'm not interested, or it had the wrong subject line, or it wasn't something that I was engaged in one way or another. So this is why communication with email is so important. There's some definite challenges with email, which we've mentioned a few up here. Miscommunication happens. Often the message isn't clear or engaging, or people will just ignore it. And getting people to respond to emails when they are getting hundreds of emails sent to them in their inbox daily is a huge challenge anyways. And then also just knowing when it is and when it is not appropriate to send an email. And again, knowing everyone's individual preference. Communication is going to be essential, and so understanding if they want to be communicating through email, or if they want to communicate through text, or if they'd rather you just pick up the phone, all of those things are important. So just some best practices with email, and let me actually jump up a slide because I'm not sure I have that. So I'm just going to mention a few best practices. Think about your message before you write it. Don't send your emails in haste, and this is again something that I definitely suggest if you are writing an important email, or if you're responding to an email that you might not be too pleased with, distancing yourself again, just like we were talking about editing, coming back a little bit later after you have been able to calm down, to think things through, to see if with a fresh eye that email that you're doing. That's always essential. So don't send emails in haste. Reflect on the tone of your message. Strive for clarity, and be brief when possible. You don't want to send a ton of important information in an email. You want to be brief and maybe schedule a follow-up call if you have a lot of information that you need to send over. Format your email so it's easy to read, and of course, proofread your email, which we've talked about. So then, when email is appropriate, just taking a little bit of time to think about when it isn't appropriate. And I think that I mentioned some of these already. Not when you need a written record of communication is a great thing. When you need to send an electronic file or a document, that's going to be essential. When you're going to send your email to a lot of different people, that's also very important. And then also, if you've had someone who said, I prefer to receive information via email, or I don't answer my phone, and you know that about me, an email is going to be that much quicker to get to me. And then on the flip side, when it's not appropriate, is when your message is long, or it's complicated, it requires discussion, or it's confidential, and some of you might be working with information throughout the year that really email is not going to be the best way to send that information. And then the last one, again, is when you're responding and you're feeling very emotional about something, or you are responding to a negative thing that was sent your way. We don't want it. First of all, if you are going to respond by email, because that is the best way to respond, we do want you to not do it in haste and to think about your message. Maybe have someone else proofread your email and look at it and say, okay, I could see how this is a little too, a little too wrong of the tone here, and maybe this is a little too negative. Let's make these changes, and making sure that it isn't coming across in a way that you don't want it to. Just a few examples of an effective email, and then I think I have a few examples of a good email and a bad email. The one here that we wanted to point out, subject lines, you really want to think about them as a way to grab attention and a way to convey information. Someone is going to be more likely to open your email if you are very specific about the subject line and you use it as sort of a way to convey convey the main point of the email. If they say, information for meeting on December 2nd, someone's going to say, oh, yes, that is a meeting I'm going to, and I need that information, rather than the title of just meeting. That's not going to convey the same amount of urgency or the same amount of interest in me to get that. Greetings and sign-offs, be formal, be polite, especially if this is someone that you do not know well. Use titles if you're going to be sending an email to someone who would prefer to use a title, such as a council member or a congresswoman or anything along those lines. And yes, just sort of be polite when possible. If it's just shooting an email to your coworker in the cubicle next to you, of course you're going to be a little bit more casual. So again, it's understanding that tone, understanding what type of communication should be used in each of those different cases. Just a few more effective emails. BCCing and CCing are very effective ways to copy your message or to really sort of tie your message back into a bigger picture. If you have a question and you don't know exactly what the answer is and you want to pull in someone else into the conversation, a great way is to CC them. If at the same time you maybe want to show someone the information but you don't want the sender to know that, BCCing, blind CCing them is going to be essential because the recipients will not be able to see the address, but if you reply all, it will go to the people who are BCC'd as well. The other thing I would say about CCing people, copying people, is it's always a nice way to keep your supervisors in the loop. In some supervisors you'll find, and this is supervisors as in your regional supervisors, but definitely the project contacts as well. Some of them you'll find they want to understand all of the different pieces that you're doing, and they may want to be CC'd on everything or a lot of things. And so they may say that to you at the very beginning, make sure that you let me know how this is going, or make sure that you carbon copy me on this. And it does make it just that much easier for you because then you have a record that you tied them into the conversation. And if they have a question or if they need anything, you can always pull up that email again and say, well, as you see, you will see below the email that I CC'd you on December 3rd. We agreed at that point of time that this was happening at this stage. And so that just sort of keeps you accountable, it keeps them accountable, it keeps everyone in the same loop. So great way just to sort of work on your relationship with your supervisor or with your project contact as well. And then just a few examples of some really not so good emails and some really good emails. And again, this sample, oops, let me go back. This sample is really not bad if you were sending it to your friend or to sending it to someone who this was a more personal question rather than a professional question. That would be fine. But in a professional context, sample 2 is going to be that much better at conveying your message, at being respectful, and at really sort of hammering out what needs to be done. Emails a lot of times are a great way if you have a question or if you need help, if you need someone to actually, if you need to actually get time face-to-face with someone, sending them an email and being able to say, I have a question about this. Can I come to your office at 3 p.m., whatever time you choose? That's a great way because they are going to respond and you'll be able to really catch them and have them focused on you during that period of time rather than just trying to track them down during the day and missing them or finding them, but they're doing 12 other things and they really don't have the capacity to pay attention to you as much as if you sort of took that time to send a very effective email to clue them in on what you're needing about to start with. And then I think that we just have one more example. And I think that the big piece here, the subject matter again, and this was sort of the same example that I gave you earlier with staff meeting, materials for staff meeting on blank date versus just saying staff meeting. there's going to be, you're going to just seem that much more put together. You're going to get a greater amount of people who actually read the email and respond to it and come prepared if you have a good subject line. And then also, don't ramble. Be very precise in your points. You know, using bullet points in your email if you're asking people to send you specific documents or to be prepared in these 3 things, or I have these 5 questions. Using bullet points is a great way to sort of cut down the text of the message and keep it very effective, keep it really sort of essential to the point of the message rather than just using a lot of additional text. So definitely something I would think of there. And then lastly, I just have some resources up here for some other general communication best practices or thoughts or anything along those lines. Again, we will be adding these slides to the resource library that you guys should now all have access to on the CivicSpark webpage. And so this will be a great place where, you know, two months from now, when you're putting together a document or you have to give your first public speaking address, you can think, oh, you know, let me review those ideas again and come back and access these resources. So definitely keep these in mind. We are going to now break to do an activity, and I will let your regional supervisors really sort of introduce this activity, and hopefully you'll be able to watch that video before you dive into that activity. We really like this elevator pitch activity because it ties in a lot of the different components of being a good communicator, being able to sell your message or to be engaging in a way that you can really sort of tailor your message to different audiences and get across what it is essential for you to get across. And I think that just sort of you guys thinking about the elevator pitch activity in general, this is a great thing to just have in your back pocket, to be ready at any given point of time when someone says, oh yeah, you're an AmeriCorps member, what is it that you do? Being able to have that really quick answer that is clear, that is concise, that is engaging is going to be really important. And the more you practice it during the year, the easier it gets to being able to just flow from you and be engaging. And so when you start doing the networking that you're going to be doing during the year, when you start doing the informational interviews, and when you actually start interviewing, that's when this is really going to, you're really going to see the value of this, because it's going to feel like second nature just to have that quick introduction to who you are and what it is that you're doing. So hopefully you now have a nice chunk of time to be working on that. Hopefully you can put together a pretty good elevator pitch, and then also take time within your region to actually practice it. And, you know, get information from your peers, get some feedback, edit it as you want so that you really have something that you can work on and make yours throughout the year. We are going to take about 45 minutes or so to do that activity, and then again after that you guys have a short break if you want to take that break, and then it is the question and answer session, which you guys are going to sort of handle on your own. I will be available if anyone has any questions that they do want to pull me into. So definitely let me know if questions come up. And in the meantime, have fun with this activity. I hope you guys see the value of this activity, and it sounds like today has been a fun day. So I'm excited to hear about it later, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.